Great. Well, welcome, and welcome to the bridge. If you've made it into today's meeting, that means that you have successfully joined our online community called the Bridge. Our online community is bringing together top IT professionals to ignite connections among those on the same path, so we can create opportunities for success inside the community and members can make an impact in their careers. So if you haven't had a chance to navigate around, we have different channels and different rooms that you can go in to see resources. You can, big Xander, to see resources, check out some upcoming events. All of our events that we host are going to be in the Bridge. So you guys already have access, you're already set up, and you'll see any upcoming events promoted in there too. So you are on the track to success. For anyone who is brand new, we do have a welcome session coming up next week on July 30th. This will just be a very open Q&A session for anyone who wants to get familiar with navigating the bridge, learn how to get the most out of it, and how to utilize all of the different tabs that you see on the left-hand side. So if you would like to join us, you can go ahead and just join the same way that you joined today's event by clicking into that Welcome New Members event page, clicking Attend, and then you can click the Zoom link to join on the day of.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ashley. We will jump into it right now. But again, thank you guys so much for joining today. Super excited to have Cher Fox and Karen Pfeifer as part of our panelists. Kind of where this kind of came up and kind of the idea of doing these discussions is the fact that at the Doyle Group, we have just access to such great talent across the board, whether that's networks, individuals, resources. And we thought, gosh, how great would it be if we were able to kind of bring these discussions to the forefront, invite our community in, build relationships. And that's kind of really where it came about for these panel discussions. Last year, we did a few panels in kind of the program and project management space. It's an area that we've played in very nicely over the years. And then we also thought, gosh, in the data space, data architecture, design, integration, MDM, it's another space that we do a lot of work in. And so we've done I think this is our second data panel discussion. We'll have a third coming out later this year and a fourth, which will be kind of more around AI. That might be beginning of the year, towards the end of the year, depending on what schedules look like. So please stay connected, and all of this will be happening in the Bridge. Again, as Ashley mentioned, you can make connections and generate discussions in the Bridge, which is super fun. For anybody who is not familiar with the Doyle Group, but we are an IT consulting and placement firm. I founded the company back in 2009, and really the focus of our organization is to partner with our clients. And I'll mention that we've got two clients because really when we work with our customers, it's helping our clients build high-performing teams, whether that's project-based work or kind of full-time hires, as well as for the candidates they themselves who are looking for new career opportunities. The one thing we realized many years ago is that it's not just about can the person do the job, it's can I work with this person. And so we've kind of put our thoughts around what really is that, and we kind of say it's the ing, or it's that human element that really brings a person or a place or an organization to life. And it's just a philosophy that we've kind of built our organization around. In terms of kind of our service offerings, it's anywhere from contract to hire. Like I mentioned, some consulting projects, more around kind of assessments and whatnot, retained executive search. And then very excited about some new partnerships we formed this year for nearshore and offshore services. We kicked off a project earlier this year for nearshore. It's been quite successful, continuing on, and super excited about that. And then on the offshore side, I actually went out to go visit one of our partners in Vietnam this year. So that was fun to see their operation and excited to offer those services to our customers as well. In terms of the areas of focus, like I kind of mentioned, executive search and kind of the CIO, EVP level type roles, digital solutions, web, mobile, UI, UX. Kind of talked about the program project management space, even some organizational change management, software development, architecture, design, DevOps, and test. And then what brings us here today is really around all the data. So analytics, data warehouse, business intelligence, and master data management. So I'll just throw it out there. If there is anybody out there who is needing to build their teams, whether that is for full-time resources or to bring in kind of project-based consultants, please let us know. If there's anybody on the call today who's considering maybe a job change or maybe are in a current
Andrew, I think you'll have to unmute yourself again. The setting, muted participants. There you go.
Sorry, did all that not come through at the beginning?
No, you've been good. It's just for the last about like 5 seconds or so.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So to jump into our panel discussion, again, super excited to have Cher and Karen here, but just to kind of give you guys some background in terms of their experience. Cher Fox is a data fitness coach that's been solving the data puzzle for over 35 years. As president and founder of Fox Consulting, she advises organizations to proactively define and optimize their processes and enhance quality standards to resolve their most painful data insight issues. Cher's decades of deep practitioner experience in data, analytics, and business intelligence, specializes in crafting and executing strategies and analytic roadmaps for global companies dealing with complex financial data solutions. Additionally, she guides senior leaders on confidentially leveraging their existing software assets to overcome their technology challenges, facilitating better experiences in making data-driven business decisions, while also resulting in significant time and money saving and maintenance and support. Cher is an international conference speaker and also serves on the board of directors for the DAMA Rocky Mountain chapter as the VP of Marketing. So welcome, Cher. Moving on to Karen. Super excited to have Karen. Karen Pfeifer is a senior data executive with over 25 years of experience in leading enterprise data teams in the entertainment, media, and distribution industry. Karen joined Odyssey, a leading multi-platform audio content and entertainment company in 2023 as our SVP of Enterprise Data. Prior to that, she was a Disney streaming executive of data product strategy and operations. Karen has also held leadership roles in the prominent media companies of Hulu, Comcast, NBCU, DirecTV, and AT&T. Karen's expertise lies in data strategy, product platforms, governance, science, and analytics. She enjoys leveraging her expertise and the power of collaborative team culture to transform data into the valuable, trusted, accessible, and insightful assets. Karen holds a BA in music from UCLA and an MS in analytics and data science from St. Joseph's University. So welcome, panelists. We're super excited to have you guys and excited for our discussion today. Before we jump into it, we do want to just let you guys know that the opinions expressed by our panelists today are of their own, do not reflect their respective employers. I hope you guys understand that it's just a reason for us to make that announcement to really allow for more an engaging and transparent conversation today. So we will jump in with that. So kind of what the structure today will be is we've got some questions for our panelists. We'll open up for Q&A at the end. Additionally, just to let you guys know where these questions had come from is really kind of through our Data Insight series discussions from our first presentation to all the wonderful work that Ashley's been doing kind of within our communities. And so these questions are really asked by our community. So we'll kick it off. This one is for you, Karen. What strategies have you found most effective in optimizing data storage and infrastructure to support scalability and performance?
Thank you, Andrew. And before I answer that, I just wanted to say thank you for the invitation to do this. I'm really excited to talk today and really excited to speak with Cher. So I'll do my best to answer these questions, and I'm sure Cher will jump in with some amazing insights as well. For strategies that I've found most effective in optimizing data storage and infrastructure, I like to take a step back when I think about this because from that question, it's a great question, but I think often, there's this thinking around, there's sort of table stakes, I'd like to say, that are tossed around the industry around cloud migration and scalability, being cost effective there, being cost effective with your data compression and archiving, reducing your storage footprint, and then sort of there's a lot of this thinking around implementing data lakes in warehouses and making sure that allows for analytical flexibility. But a lot of companies, I feel like, are, they come together through growth and acquisition. And then so we're forced into an area, at least what I've seen, to be very multi-cloud. And so when you get into a multi-cloud type of world, there's sort of the concept of this data storage infrastructure. You have to make sure that you're doing that scalably across something like that. So usually when I first get started, I usually start with low-hanging fruit, and have the teams clean out old tech debt. Often when you're running an enterprise data team, at least from my perspective, it's very centered around your data engineering teams. And there's this optimal balance of this 70-30 you hear about, where you're doing this kind of 70% new work, and then you're trying to keep this like tech debt or operational work that you're doing down to this 30%. But that can often creep up on organizations if they're not spending that valuable time to maybe be very highly prioritized with that 70% of work, and then really truly leaning in on leaving that 30% time for continuously breaking down that technical debt. So low-hanging fruit I've found is coming in right away and having them, for example, clean out old temp tables and duplicates and anything that comes out of not following best practices for cleaning up as you go along, which often, at least in small, I would say maybe any size company, data teams are always moving fast and they're forgetting to do that work. So we come in and we clean that out. And then we dig into the harder work of going after duplicate data sets, and even the harder work of determining what is unused data sets. And that's where often I've found employing data product best practices comes into play, because that's where you want to have really good relationships with your stakeholders to understand what data they are using now, not using, and what data they might need to use in the future. And then making sure that you're not accidentally, for example, getting rid of data that might be needed for some future project. So that's where the harder work comes in. And I would say that the most value out of that, because storage is cheap now, right, is that you're really trying to, again, have more space and time for your engineering teams to do the work they need to do, as opposed to having to maintain all this extra work of maintaining data that is not being used or that is taking up storage space you don't need. And the really interesting part about all that is that even if you are cleaning up the data storage, that's really only a smaller part of what is probably your biggest cost, which is your compute. So the other side of it, when you're talking about, being careful about being able to support scalability and performance, is making sure that on the compute side, you're, at least in an enterprise world, you're making sure that your warehouses are scaled the right way for the queries and that teams are running effective queries. So a lot of that is less around the technical maintenance of things, but more around educating your teams on data best practices and best use. And I'll stop there and see if there's maybe any thoughts from Cher you wanted to add into that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing me into the conversation. I think you hit on a lot of really good things. We tend to preach a lot about data governance and management and really establishing those clear policies, which, you talked about, do we really even need this data? So, having data retention and quality control and compliance, to continue to maintain our data integrity and, our security around things. Mm-hmm. I've always found that having a really good DBA on your team is really valuable. And I've worked with some clients where sometimes they think that resource is something that we don't really need, but how they manage databases and optimize that data storage is huge. And their deep knowledge is it's usually something that's not so much in our developer wheelhouse. So I lean heavily on my DBAs to really make sure that we are optimizing that data storage, because and I'm sure you've seen this too, Karen, it's hard to go to, your leaders and say you need more storage because they want to know why. And then, they're going to start asking the difficult questions. What can we get rid of? What don't we need? What do we need to archive, etc. So
Another question that I kind of think about when question is, I guess, how often would you suggest that people kind of go back and kind of reevaluate and reassess this question? I mean, obviously it's usually something kind of comes, we're actually going through a data integration project right now, right? And obviously that comes with driving our decision to reevaluate these things. But do you guys have a, I don't know, semi-annual review of this, or thoughts there?
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, we do try to do that on a continuous basis, right? Like Cher had a great point about having a good DBA. We certainly have, I've certainly leaned in on making sure that we've got someone that understands this side of the data and the storage and the service and the right platforms and the right way to handle platforms. But we're doing it on a continuous basis. It's not just some quarterly review. It's a constant review.
Gotcha.
You just can't, I believe you really can't stay ahead of it otherwise. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you. Well,
It's a
this
good
next one, we'll kick it back to Sharon or to Karen as well, can you share an example of a successful data integration project that improved operational efficiencies and decision-making? And as I'm thinking about this one, I don't know if there'll be a question at the end for Q&A of maybe an unsuccessful data integration project that people will ask about, but I'll let you take this one.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. When I'm thinking about data integration, I don't know how many people on this call are really familiar with what we mean by data integration. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a step back and kind of answer it from a holistic perspective, because from a holistic enterprise data point of view, right? Like data teams are often downstream of the source of record, right? So we have a lot of data coming into us once it's determined that we need to create a data product, and we're bringing in that data from the source. But the area that we actually own really starts at ingestion. So I think of it in terms of like data zones, and these are conceptual models because a data zone could be, any platform you're on. And the idea of that is that today it's like we want to meet our customers, our internal, and when I say customers, I mean internal clients and stakeholders from the different domains. We want to meet them anywhere their data is, right? And that's a more modern way to think about data. And then culling down from that, the sort of golden record of what is needed to be possibly shared across different domains of the company, then that's what enterprise data is. So when we meet the data, we're meeting it at the source, and then we're pulling it in through what we call ingestion, right? And so, so since we're often not the source of record, when we have that first contact with the data, we're just looking to persist all our data for a certain time. And then we move into integration. And then after integration, I'll come back to integration in a second, but after integration, then you're moving into sort of like this foundational or productized area where, again, you're moving from integration, which is where you're normalizing your data, into maybe denormalizing it back out again and making flat and wide, so that finally, when you have an access zone, which is sort of the fourth zone I think about, is that's where anyone can come to with whatever tool they need to access the data and access it consistently and have it be governed. And that's where that data mesh concept comes into play, where you're really allowing the domains to utilize that data any way they need to, but just from an access zone point of view. So then back to integration. So answering the question from, a successful data integration project, really a lot of that means to me that you're taking these various sources and you're normalizing them, and you're getting rid of data inconsistencies and errors. You're sort of having a common model that you're establishing for those data, and then you're looking to productize them. I've seen a lot of the successful integration work done on data that's very more transactional. On the subscriber data, for example, is a little bit easier. Where it gets harder is in some of the streaming data that's more modern to bring in, because you're dealing with more near real-time use cases, and that's harder to conceptualize and get around.
Love it. Cher, any additional thoughts on that?
I think Karen really touched on most of it. Really, anytime my clients have fragmented or data silos, they're just not performing optimally. And, a common problem that happens then is they don't have a single version of the truth. One person grabbed data and they made their assumptions about it because maybe there's not enough metadata to explain the data. Somebody else grabbed the same set of data and was able to, yarn a completely different story, and then they bat heads at meetings. So having one version of the truth and really, getting all that data, playing in the same sandbox is really a huge operational efficiency. We can create analytics on all these different data sources. Power BI is a real strong one. I'll go get data from here and go get data from here and go get data from here. But then, your presentation tool is doing your heavy lifting, which isn't really great for performance. It's really better if we're doing that in the back end with the data.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights on that one. We'll kick this one to Cher, and this is definitely in her wheelhouse. I know something that kind of our prep meeting, she definitely talked a lot about her insistence on quality and consistency. So what are some of the key strategies for ensuring data quality and consistency across teams, Cher?
Okay, well, I do want to step back because when I answered the first question, I didn't thank everyone for being here, and thanks to the Doyle Group for having me. Data quality management really defines the expectations and requirements for our data to be considered high quality, or what a lot of people call fit for purpose. We want to establish benchmarks around the quality of our data so we can measure and evaluate it. There was a study completed in 2020 where a gentleman by the name of Tom Redman, he has a handle called the Data Doc, which I love because I have a handle called the Datanista. He stated that only 3% of an organization's data meets data quality standards. And that's not 3% of organizations in the world. That's for each organization, only 3% of their data is really high quality. And he revisited his study in 2024, and this hasn't changed. In fact, it's actually gotten worse by about 0.5%. So in that same study, he found that the cost of bad data is typically about 20% of the revenue for a typical organization. And I don't know about you guys, but I can think of a lot better ways to be using 20% of an organization's revenue. So I've been giving a presentation this year. I gave it at my DAMA Rocky Mountain chapter that I'm on the board of, and I will be giving it at our upcoming SQL Saturday Denver and at West Slope Startup Week over in Durango. And it's about data quality management best practices. And in that presentation, I provide a roadmap, and there's about 12 stops on the roadmap. We want to be defining our data quality standards. We want to be completing that data profiling. We want to be assessing where we are today so that we can figure out what our goals are for the future. We want to definitely consider implementing data governance. It's a very scary word, to govern, to restrict, to limit, but there's so much empowerment that data governance gives an organization that it should be at least discussed and considered. We have to validate and cleanse our data and build metadata, which a lot of people don't understand what that is, but it's the data about the data. So it helps increase data literacy by explaining what that data should be used for so that two people don't come up with different stories from the same data. We have to monitor our data quality, and we have to ensure that we're training our humans, because our humans are generating about 20% of our data entry errors, which we don't think is maybe a lot, but it's enough. And then, just increasing that awareness about the importance and impact of data quality. And that really has to be a message from our leadership from the top down. We want to establish these data quality metrics. As Karen mentioned, we're always trying to continuously improve with all of our processes. That's definitely one of the pillars of a data governance framework, is to be constantly reviewing and constantly trying to improve. We can definitely consider implementing data quality tools. I've learned how to bake in some data quality into customers' existing data platforms. They don't always have to invest in another tool. And we always want to be staying on top of collaborating and communicating. again, quality just doesn't happen in a vacuum or in silos. Silos don't work for any of the discussion that we're going to have today. And data trust is really a huge topic of conversation between vendors and people and with our stakeholders and with our users. And our customers want so much more access to data today. So they tend to put a lot of pressure on us to have this high level of data quality. They want to trust the data that we are holding on to them and they're, and that we're following privacy compliance. I mean, gosh, I'm out of breath just trying to cover all of that because, and it's no wonder that organizations are struggling with this, that it really is one of the top challenges that they face today. And data ownership isn't just for data teams. It's not for data leaders. Everyone in an organization is responsible for data. If they use it, if they consume it, if they create it, if they manipulate it. And the more people that are, participating in that party, hopefully the cleaner the data is and, the more value it is generating for the organization. So.
You brought up the thought of,
Yeah.
data trust, and I'm just kind of curious. I imagine you guys have sometimes where, again, whether it's exec over here, going, that information is wrong. I know it's wrong. I guess, how do you, especially when you are a technologist and you're trying to present the data, do you have suggestions in terms of how to get people to buy into the data other than I'm the data expert and I own the data? I'm just kind of curious if are those challenges that you guys run into? I mean, maybe they're not, but I would think that there would be.
Yeah,
I'll let Karen have a crack at that first.
absolutely. It's, when you're working through that, a lot of it is trying to, get to that, what is the one metric that, everyone understands, what is this particular churn metric, for example, or, and so ultimately it starts with that, having those analytic teams, I think, aligning on what the key metrics are and their definitions down to the numerator and denominator and the fields that support each of those metrics in the calculation, right? And it's a lot of hard, you roll up your sleeves, blood, sweat, and tears, because over what I've typically seen in organizations is that each part of the organization has come up with their own, like, slightly different flavor for how they calculate that metric. And so a lot of it is like this willingness. I think Cher had touched upon it great, that it's sort of this fostering this data-driven culture where there's this willingness to, like, come to that alignment first. So it almost starts with getting teams better at communicating and collaborating. I don't know if you do things like lunch and learns, or having more demos, different types of, like, analytics demos, so that teams can go, oh, I see how you do that. Maybe we do it differently, and start that conversation more as a groundswell. And then that helps to get people to come to the table and go, okay, we need to finally align on what these metrics are, so that executive A and executive B are getting the same metric from their teams, but slightly different. So I think that's really important.
Love it. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for my clients, we typically sit down and we set up business rules around the data. And then the trust isn't that the data is right or wrong. The trust is that we're integrating, ingesting, transforming, testing the data to make sure that it meets those business rules. And then, a lot of companies start out and they say, well, our BI is broken. Well, their BI is not broken. They have a whole bunch of data issues upstream. So the BI is doing exactly what we told it to do and exactly what we programmed it to do. So, fixing the data errors upstream and then putting guardrails and goalies and all sorts of things in place to make sure that what the users are consuming is high quality data. It's becomes trusting the process and ensuring that process is being maintained and managed. And, putting those kind of business rules and goalies in place is definitely a piece of a data governance policy. So, when companies start to shy away from these words that are complicated and, sound really restricting, they're really actually enabling and empowering if you do it right.
Love it.
I agree.
To our next question, and this one is also for Cher, but what are some data quality metrics and key performance indicators to benchmark and assess its effectiveness?
Gosh, there are so many ways that you can measure, monitor, and even audit around data quality. And, not all organizations are going to do it the same. As Karen mentioned, it's definitely going to depend upon your industry, your market, the size of your organization, and, the amount and speed of your data ingestion. If you're drinking from the fire hose, you're going to have to pick your battles on probably what is your definition of high quality data, because it's just coming at you too quickly. I like to speak about what I call data fitness, because you can train your data just like you can train your body. And I speak in my presentation, I have 12 of them, and I'm going to refer to a list here. Acceptability, accessibility, accuracy, completeness, consistency, integrity, precision, relevance, timeliness, uniqueness, usability, and validity. That's a lot. And that's why I say not all organizations, new startups might go, hey, accuracy is important for us, completeness is important to us, validity is important to us. We don't have enough people to worry about accessibility. As long as, those other things are good, we're going to accept it. So, there's a lot of give and take in that process. We can definitely measure, sadly, data entry error rates. We try to evaluate that as like the number of errors per 1,000 entries. Remember that 20% of our errors tend to be human generated. On the flip side of that coin, we have what's the data correction rate? How many corrections are we making per month? And are those corrections able to be made through data quality tools, or data governance tools, or maybe some test automation? There are some ways that those can be automatically done. We'll capture the error, we'll fix it. Here's the old value, here's the new value, and then push it forward in our ETL process. We can measure the degree that data meets the needs and expectations of our users. User satisfaction is huge today, whether that's our internal users or our external users. So, if people are hesitant to use the data, then somewhere in the back of their mind, they don't trust it, and it's not providing value, and they find too many errors, and they spend too much of their workflow trying to clean that up and trying to reconcile and things like that. And, really beautiful analytics products will be abandoned if the users don't trust it. And that's a huge waste of resources, money, and a variety of other things for organizations. So we hate to see that, and we never want to put our clients in those kind of places. There are costs to poor data quality. The cost of reworking it, in certain industries, bad data quality could result in a bad decision being made and could result in a lost opportunity. And what is the, financial impact of that? Sometimes those can be measured. And with, again, data governance, I'm gonna keep pounding it home. With compliance, we do need to be meeting our regulatory requirements. We do need to be evaluating our compliance with privacy regulations. And, data security is definitely a pillar of data governance, and putting all of your cyber incident data to use, you can definitely create more metrics around data quality if your data quality issues are causing data security problems. So sorry for the pause. I knew where I was headed.
Very good. That was a great overview, great response. Karen, any additional thoughts to that?
I think, as always, Cher covered that really, really well. I think, I would just like to double down on that. When we're looking at data quality, you mentioned something about, stakeholder happiness with the data, right? And with what they're getting. And a lot of that for my teams in the past have always started with making sure that there's this time to detection that we're always watching, and then time to resolution. So I look at a MTTR type of metric when we get more sophisticated, which is mean time to resolution, right? And trying to get a sense of like, okay, how fast, when did we detect the issue? And then how fast did we respond to it? And then how quickly did it take us to actually resolve that issue, which are a lot of different steps. And so I think watching those metrics is really key for stakeholder happiness. And then the hardest and tricky part is having a really good handshake between the data engineering teams that are often, trying to resolve these issues, and then your data analytics teams that are often the face of your stakeholders, to the outside world, right? And making sure that they have this understanding that, okay, problem is hit, we've detected it, we let the analytics teams know what the issue is. We don't know yet. We let them know how long we think it's going to take us to understand the issue and then resolve the issue. And then analytics has that ball, and they understand they have that ball to then go and let the stakeholders know, hey, you might be expecting, this certain update to your data in your dashboard with your 9 a.m. cup of joe, and you're not going to see that. And we don't expect to see it till an hour from now or this afternoon or the next day or whatever. So I think a lot of it is just stakeholder management. I think everyone realizes what we're doing is complicated, and that we're all working our very hardest to get it done really well. And then so really it comes down to just sort of transparency and awareness, and then that stakeholder management of expectations of when you're going to resolve the issue for them. So I like to lean in on that as well.
Well, that's awesome. What's really interesting, right, is I think everybody thinks about, at least if you're not in your world, right? You think of data engineers as these highly complex technical individuals, but how important it is that they're able to communicate that to, like you said, to stakeholders, and to bring those soft skills to light, to really set expectations and communicate, because I think obviously communication is always the biggest challenge in any relationship, personal or professional, right? So that was interesting. All right, back over to Karen. Ooh, my slide just moved on me. Sorry, where did this go?
How can organizations effectively integrate? Oh, I think there was a question before that.
Was there? Sorry about that, you guys.
Yep, that's it.
How can organizations effectively integrate into AI into their data strategies and enhance decision-making processes? Sorry, Andrew, taking your...
No, I appreciate that. I got wobbly over here.
Yeah, so, and the key factors that determine successful AI adoption. Okay, that's a lot, but all right, let's break that down. So, when people are thinking about, starting to think about AI and decision making, there's use cases like predictive analytics, sales forecasting, customer churn prediction. We might go straight to thinking about, how do I incorporate this sophisticated AI into these sophisticated things I need to do for the company? But again, just backing it up, I think it really starts with what we sort of touched on before, which is team education of understanding even what AI is, for integrating it in decision making. What I'm finding is that, Gen AI, I'm sure everyone on this call has heard the term, and it's probably used on a daily, if not possibly sickeningly hourly, minute by minute basis now in any data conversations you're having at the company. So so some of it is educating, leaders across the teams, and the teams that your company's probably already done AI for a very long time. It's been around for a very long time. Probably, it started entering more public knowledge and awareness in probably the 70s and 80s, but it's been around for a while. And so our teams, for example, at companies I've worked in the past, and even currently, do AI, right? Machine learning, then deep learning with neural networks, applying that to models that's already been done and being done. And so you probably already have AI integrated into what you do already, whether it's by virtue of a tool that you've adopted at your company, which is probably the first accelerator for most people experiencing AI, or you're doing it with models that your team's already been doing for a decade. Then there's generative AI and bringing in that new layer of being able to have an agent now respond, the machine as an agent respond to you and understand more natural language inquiries, being able to generate images or look at large corpuses of, volumes of text or documents you've had and summarize them quickly and efficiently and effectively for you. And so when I think about that, I break it down into two parts for my teams. One are, like I mentioned before, the accelerators, things that are going to help my team be more efficient and effective at what they do. And we already looked at that at other companies I've been at. We've already looked at things like co-pilots for the engineering teams, or including AI in our data observability tools, which is very helpful because you're looking at broad scales of large amounts of information and needing a summarization and then alerting and intelligent alerting on it. So AI is perfect for those sorts of things. And then the other half of the coin is then, trying to do things more sophisticated, like building your own models. And I would wager that for the majority of the companies out there today, the models that you might use have already been built, especially now in the generative AI space. So what you're now leaning into is, do I buy something that's out there, or do I use open source and try to apply that? And then to what data do I bring from my company that will help me to accelerate my company's needs more specifically to help tune a model versus actually train a whole new model. So integrating AI for decision making starts with understanding what AI is, and then it starts with understanding the differences of applying tools that are already out there versus trying to build something new, and even then leverage models that are already out there to build something new for purpose-built adoptions for your company. So I'll stop there because that was a lot.
I love it. Cher, anything else you'd want to add to that?
We often find when companies are trying to navigate building a data strategy that they sometimes volunteer people that they're part of the data process. And that usually never works out. But if you want to invite people into your data process as owners, stewards, things of that nature, you often have to take a look at their existing workflows and their tasks and see if you can do a shift or if you can automate. And I think in some cases, AI is going to help us with that, to free up the people that we really feel are our data champions and our data experts, so that they can engage more in our data management processes.
Gotcha.
Agree.
No, thank you guys. Moving on to the next one. And again, for Karen, what is your process for, oh no, this one is for Cher. Sorry about that. What is your process for identifying emerging data trends and technologies that are worth investing in for future growth?
I think that there is a process around it. You definitely want to do your due diligence in your market and industry research, and that may be going to conferences and hearing case studies from your competitors or companies you admire. It doesn't always have to be a competitor, or how startups are using these things. We at Fox Consulting, we perform lots of proof of concepts and lots of return on investments, because we really need to evaluate feasibility and what's our impact on efficiency, productivity, revenue growth before companies jump into these new things. They're fun, they're exciting, but we have to take a step back and look at the reality of it. And maybe that means getting our hands on a free trial and piloting a project and putting a small team together to make sure that that we have the skills in-house to implement these things. Otherwise, you will tend to incur a large consultant bill to get these things implemented and get people trained. We do a lot of comparisons of vendors, whether that's benchmarks, assessments of their products. A client will say, hey, we're interested in learning about, great new BI tools. I always like to have my clients make sure that they are defining their policies and their standards and their procedures first. And we find a tool that best supports that, instead of rushing into buying a tool and then bending our data culture to it. That almost always fails. It never works. Then that tool gets boxed up and put in the tool shed in the back, and we move on to something else. So I complete a lot of matrices for clients, comparing and contrasting tools and technologies and processes and things like that, so that they can readily look at it and say, okay, this was the requirement. Vendors A, B, and C made it. These guys don't. How, what's the priority of that requirement and how important is it to me? And then, yep, I already said, finding those tools and technologies that fit your culture, as opposed to bending your culture to new and fun things. And that includes AI, that includes large language models, that includes anything that's really next generation technology or what's coming down the road. So, and we see so many technologies come and go. I swear to God, I've learned 30 plus programming languages over all the years, and I maybe use 5 today. It's a change fatigue almost for our employees to be constantly learning new technologies. And with that kind of change fatigue, resistance starts to build up. So we do have to be very careful about what we want to introduce and what the impacts are going to be on our culture when we do introduce those new things.
Love it. Karen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love what Cher said, about, clients, defining policies and procedures. That brought to mind, kind of a more specific case where, in the past, like, governance has always been something that, there's a ton of tools out there for it now. In the past, there weren't, and you were having to kind of do a lot of like your own sort of governance through, various spreadsheets and things like that. But now there's a lot of really great tools. But if you don't really understand how your organization wants to run, if they want to run, for example, top down, where you have a governance team that's basically saying, hey, here's what all the metrics are, and here's what the gold standard is, and this is how the things need to be defined. That might be all well and good for a certain size of organization for you. But then if you're a different size organization, some organizations I've been at go from the bottom up, and they like to source out across the organization what the definitions are, and then try to bubble up to, some adherence to, depending on the domain, what those mean for each domain. And there are different tools for that. And I won't state what they are on the call, but, there's very specific governance tools for a more top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach. And if you don't know what your approach is, you're going to buy the wrong tool and you're going to be in a world of pain. So I agree with Cher, having somebody come in, you make that assessment is going to save you a lot of money, time, and effort and frustration in the long run.
And do you guys, when I look at this question, right, I think the worth investing in is always the key to this. Do you typically find it's in executives that are coming from like a strategic business decision that you're going to, okay, listen, let's go out and look at those tools? Or are you constantly always evaluating the tools that are out there? Because like, Cher mentioned, there's so many new tools coming to market, every which way, and then some. It seems like it's just so hard to be able to manage. Where do you spend your time in investing in the tools or the trends?
It's hard because you have a lot of these big companies spend a lot of time and money courting leadership, right? And so at the end of the day, a relationship might have been formed, or there might have been a prior embedded relationship with a company, a big company, big embedded relationship. And I've worked at some big companies and seen this, right? Where you might have a tool that's come along that actually is better for what you need. But at the end of the day, there's some sort of leveraging of an already invested relationship to drive down cost that drives it. Or like I said, there's somebody who's got a managed relationship with a leader, and all of a sudden this becomes the darling. So, as a data organization, you're always going to be dealing with that. And sometimes it is what it is. And fortunately, I think there's always a way to work around that. But, ideally you're having those conversations with the leaders and throwing your opinion into the hat and trying to at least guide where you think it's best to go.
Makes sense.
Yeah, when we work with clients, we like to go out to the tool shed and see what they're hiding. They've got boxes of stuff with dust on it. They've got tools that are dull, but a couple people still use them and things like that. And sometimes a new tool isn't always the right step. And you have to ask them, well, questions about the tools. Why is this tool dull? Why does this tool have dust on it? Why did these tools fail you? And a lot of times it's implementation, it's the sales process didn't deliver in the implementation process. We've all heard that disconnect. And but they're still potentially paying licensing fees on that, or that tool that's got dust on it is actually part of an entire data platform. So it doesn't hurt to pull it out and dust it off and find the right people to help them implement it correctly. These big companies, which we can name, Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, that have these gigantic platforms, they're all pretty competitive. Just because your competitor's using SAP and you're using Microsoft doesn't mean either one of you are behind the 8 ball. It's just leveraging those technologies to their fullest extent. That's the most important. And sometimes that means upskilling. Sometimes that means hiring. Sometimes that, depending upon, where you feel maybe you're a little further behind, you might need to hire a consultancy of experts to come in and not only get you to the right point, but get you even further with it. So, the right tool it's not always the right answer, unfortunately, but leadership they go away to conferences and they come back and they start dropping all these new terms and they start using all this new lingo. And I like to call it buzzword bingo because they've heard all these wonderful things at conferences and they come back and they start talking in a different language to their stakeholders and the rest of the leadership team because they learned all this new stuff. And, I was explaining to somebody on a podcast the other day, 35 years ago, I started my career as a programmer. Well, that became a developer, and then that became an architect. I'm still a programmer. I still do all the same things. It's no different. So we're using new, fun, sparkly words for things that have been consistent to us over time. So that's where we just have to be careful, and we have to sit with leadership and try to understand what they're all excited about, and then try to translate that into their existing environment, and then, have that reality check of where they're at and where they want to go.
Love it.
Agreed.
This one back to Cher. How do you invest in continuous learning and upskilling to stay ahead of data innovations? And I guess I'll ask this question not only for yourself, but for your teams. Is there any suggestions for this?
Even for clients, I mean, you implement a new tool, you have to help clients navigate their way through it. So we're so lucky today because I can tell you how many times I've moved my big, thick, beautiful books that taught me, SQL 2012, SQL 2016, whatever versions of those are. I have multiple versions of SQL books. I have multiple versions of SAP books. And I'm old school because that was how we used to learn. You used to have to buy a big book. And these big books weren't cheap. They were 60 to $100. They make great paperweights, but I still store them and I move them, and every now and again I do pull one out. So it does happen because some languages haven't changed. HTML is still the same from long ago, and XML is still the same from long ago, and Unix still does what Unix does. But today, everyone's so lucky because we have all this online content and all this digital content, whether that's digital copy that's constantly being updated that we can read, or digital videos that we can watch. There are so many people out there that are experts that have given us all this free stuff on LinkedIn and on YouTube. You can just click away and you can get in a course path and get going. So, some of these online courses, they might be associated with conferences or companies like Dataversity, which produces DGIQ conferences, might be boot camps, might be professional organizations like DAMA. All of our events, we record those and release the videos and the slide decks to our professional members. Conferences, if you attend a conference, you are going to get hopefully some digital content out of that you'll be able to reference for a while. Webinars and online seminars come with that, just like what we're doing today. So, and a lot of those things have certifications involved with them. So I just wrote a post this week about including more tech talent from a group called STARS, which is those skilled through alternative routes, where they have a high school degree, but maybe they don't have a bachelor's. And we see so many job posts that say, well, I require a bachelor's and 6 years of experience, or I require a master's degree in 4. Well, why can't you require an associate's with 8, or a high school degree with 15? Whatever amount makes you feel better about it. Why aren't we including more people in that conversation? Because a lot of people used to go to boot camps and they would do these 9-month intensives and they'd come out with these 4 or 5 certifications, and they used to be able to get a job. And now that market's shifted a little bit and it's a little bit harder. So let's see, junior folks, they may benefit from finding mentors in, organizations, coming to places like this and collaborating at network events. So lots of people gather at conferences and pull us industry leaders aside and say, hey, I have this problem, or hey, this thing's happening to me, or I'm wondering about, what the futuristic look is on this. So those are great places to find your tribe. And that's something that I really believe in, and try to spread that good work. I also hope organizations are offering internal training programs and possibly tuition reimbursement so that they can gain more knowledge, whether that's for an internal promotion, new upskilling for a new product, or there's a lot of, I've seen at my clients, and I hear about it from my teams. I hear the whispers are like, no, I got to sit down and I got to get, so many hours of training courses done in order, before my performance review comes up. So I know some organizations do that, or maybe they buy subscriptions to companies that do offer that and will offer that to their people. And a lot of people, honestly, they just start experimenting with new technologies. There's free versions or there's trials available. Sometimes that results in education. They discover new functionalities or features. Maybe if they're trying to build a portfolio, they can add that to a portfolio to share for new roles, or, to exhibit that they have a skill set for a promotion. So we're so lucky today with just all the vast ways that we can get access to improving ourselves professionally, personally, etc. Where back in the day we had to buy a book or we had to sit in a room with a human leading a class.
Love it. Sharon, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I think Cher covered a lot of it. I don't know if I think you said subscriptions, and that perked me up to remember a point where it's like, I'd been in an organization where we had come to discover that there was a couple different platforms that we were using, and they actually had credits that we could be using from their sites to go and, spend these credits against all these fantastic education classes they had about how to use the platform, credits and free certifications. And it's funny because, like, for some reason that had been in the contracts, but nobody had been utilized at the company or been dubbed the person that would help raise awareness that this could be used, or to even get those credits used up. And so it's something to kind of look, if you're like at a larger company and you're interested in this, there's often credits and certifications you can get that come with the platforms and the tools that you're using. And people just aren't aware of it because they don't have someone that's dubbed the person that drives getting that used. So it'd be good to check in with your leadership and check in with the, your platform representatives and see if they have that, because some of those are really great programs. And then the other thing was just leaning in on mentorship. I've been in a few companies now where we've done these things called mentor circles. They're very informal. I really enjoy it. It's sort of like co-shared mentorship, as opposed to having one person where you have time with individuals that want to come, work with you individually, it's sort of like a group mentorship thing where you'll have a co-host with you and you'll partner on a set list of topics and you'll spread them out over a month and you'll invite maybe a close group, maybe like 5 or 6 people at most that join this circle. And then it's very closed. It's very like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? You all talk and learn and support each other and you talk about these topics. And I've really enjoyed that mentor circle style of mentorship. And if you don't have that, it's a really kind of it's an easy way to get into that for a company to get that started. So for what it's worth, throwing out mentor circle, you can go look it up. I'm sure there's a lot of information out there about how to start one.
I love it. And the biggest thing I would say, and I don't always follow my own advice, right? But just for any kind of self-development, you just have to dedicate the time to it. I think a lot of people are always planning or intending or wanting, but if you don't take action to actually plan time for it, you probably won't do it, right? So little plug there. Back to Karen. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but just kind of managing the expectations from stakeholders, especially for new technologies and the lovely, AI that everybody's buzzed about right now. So take that one.
Sure, I can take that one. So it's a pretty easy framework to memorize, right? I talked about this before, right? Where you're setting realistic expectations with the stakeholder. I think I lean in on that a bit, right? And then I think that also kind of parlays into involving stakeholders early and often in the conversation. And then focusing on measurable outcomes. And then all that kind of funnels into the building of trust that we talked about. Cher talked about that a lot too in terms of data quality, but I'll touch on that in terms of AI too. And then then the final big part I said before, which is continuous communication. So if I sort of take those 5 points and break them down, if I'm starting with setting realistic expectations, you want to start setting this expectation of what AI can do and cannot do so that you're sort of avoiding this like hype and focus, and you're kind of focusing more on the practical applications that's relevant to what your stakeholder specifically needs. And then there's driving the transparency. So being transparent about the limitations and potential risks, and then providing realistic timelines. So if I'm talking about setting realistic expectations, it's also around, I touched on this before, of really understanding, what AI is and isn't. If you think about AI, there's this very large umbrella of, machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, NLP, natural language processing, all these different flavors of AI, and then generative AI, right? And so educating on that, and then saying, okay, well, I know you guys have heard this Gen AI thing. This has happened a lot around the companies I've been at where, oh, they're Gen AI, but really what you probably mean in this case really is just taking some really great machine learning and maybe throwing in a deep learning model and, for example, chaining them together to get what we need. And you don't necessarily need to spend, I often say this, like, you don't need to buy the Ferrari when all you really need is your good, strong Chevy here that we've built, right? Like, you just need a Chevy, right? Maybe a good Toyota, right? But like, we don't need this Ferrari just yet. We'll get there, right? And then when we talk about involving stakeholders early and often, so there's gathering input from them, understanding their goals and concerns, doing, again, having that collaboration muscle always working, where you've had the demos like I talked about before, you've had the lunch and learns, and people are all speaking the same language. I often say there's always 3 conversations to getting to the point where the first conversation is you're talking at each other, the second conversation is you're talking with each other, and the third conversation is you're actually understanding each other. And I think that if you're not having that collaboration along the way, then starting at talking at each other is not a really healthy state to start at. So that involves early and often conversations. The third part in the framework was focusing on measuring your outcomes, right? So defining successful metrics, establishing clear, quantifiable goals. say that 3 times fast. And, you know, AI implementation aims to achieve that, right? A lot of it is around increased efficiency, improving decision-making, cost savings, but that's not anything new. Like companies have been wanting to do that for eons, right? It's just maybe you can accelerate it with AI. And then tracking your progress is really important. We really lean into that in my teams when I come in and do what I do, which is establishing and building enterprise data teams. A lot of that, I really like to lean in on making sure that we're monitoring and able to actually demonstrate through data the progress that we're making, and nothing should change for AI as well. Cher had talked about this earlier too, right? This is about governance, good data governance. You know, a lot of companies have sort of, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here because I feel strongly about this. A lot of companies, when we're focusing on measurable outcomes, they're sort of building in this, you know, data lake and, you know, data lake house and all these things were like the big thing for the last decade. But really now with generative AI, we're going to get back to this focus, I strongly believe, on having normalized governed data. You've got, if you're going to have a generative AI model and not want it to hallucinate too much, because let's be frank, all of them do hallucinate to some extent, right? But if you want it to be understand where the hallucination came from or what's going on, you have to have that governed, normalized data that you're building and not have just it drawing from some massive data lake where who knows what the heck is in that data, or as I affectionately call them, data swamps. So then building trust, the last 2 points again, I think I had said was building trust. So you would start with maybe some pilot projects, right? Don't start with some expectation that you're going to just go build something and go run off and do it and then not check in with your stakeholders, right? You're going to start with pilot projects, start with something smaller that's low risk, something very focused. That's what we've been doing in my teams. We start with very specific projects with very specific outcomes and call them POCs and make sure everyone understands that we need to have explainability and be able to address concerns along the way. And then the 5th one was that continuous communication. So regular updates, managing setbacks, celebrating successes. I often say that, you know, I'm not a perfect leader by far. I could do a lot better in the celebration of success, I believe. So maybe that's where I get help someday more. But I think celebrating successes and highlighting the wins and sharing the stories about how AI is positively impacting both the organizations and the stakeholder and the people running it, I think is really important. So I've said a lot. I'll stop there.
I love it. I was going to ask Cher in terms of, you know, how do you determine who's ready for AI?
You know, we step back with our clients and perform readiness assessments, and that's going to be around a variety of disciplines, whether that's data management, data governance, data science, and these next generation technologies. So we evaluate, you know, many facets of their business and their readiness, whether that might be strategic alignment, what's the status of their data, is their infrastructure ready, how are their people doing, what do their processes and workflows look like? I mean, we go through all these things in this checklist, and then we create that action plan once we've identified what their gaps are, and we set those priorities and develop those action items, you know, get that buy-in to assign responsibilities, set deadlines, and get going, and then monitor that progress. You know, as Karen mentioned, it's important, you know, these are agile concepts. It's important to celebrate those quick wins, and it's important to fail fast. So if we're going to, you know, if we identified a risk and by golly, it creeps up and we stumble over it, let's fail fast, let's learn, and let's keep moving. We don't have time to, you know, sit there and mull in it. So, you know, I spoke at 2 conferences in June. They were back-to-back weeks. And one was the Data Governance and Information Quality Conference. And then the next week, it was the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference. So, you know, one's coming from a very much a data perspective and one's very much coming from a risk perspective. But regardless of the domains, there was so much concern about AI readiness. And it was beautiful to sit and watch some of my fellow speakers say the exact same thing, even though they came from completely different domains. You can't govern AI if you don't have, you know, your data privacy policies and your compliance in place. And if you don't have those things, then you likely have some data security problems. And data security is a pillar of data governance. So, you know, we talk about these really big data governance frameworks, but there's some pillars you just can't ignore, even if you don't implement the entire framework. So we really just want to make sure that all the data fundamental best practices are in place, you know, as the key to moving forward with some of these really exciting technologies. But let's be fair and, you know, step back for a second and have that reality check. Because I am also hearing some of my fellow speakers say, well, companies pulled the trigger on it and then they had to turn it off. It was too much. They weren't ready for it. And, you know, people get fired over that. So, you know, this is not the industry for that kind of behavior. So we don't want to see our clients, you know, learning those hard lessons and fellow organizations learning those hard lessons. It's better and it's more cost effective. I won't necessarily say it saves money, although in the long run it probably does. It's more cost effective to do it right the first time and slow down and make sure all your ducks in a row and all your, you know, your foundation is in and all your walls are in before you put the roof on your house.
Awesome. Well, I was just looking at time. I know we want to definitely leave some time available for some Q&A. And so I don't know if you've been receiving any questions, Ashley, but you can either kind of chat those through or feel free to join in and just ask live. But obviously, great discussion today, and I'm looking forward to some of the questions that are coming in. Ashley, is there anything in queue that you already see?
Nothing that I see yet. So you guys, again, as Andrew said, please feel free to submit your questions into the chat, or if you feel more comfortable unmuting yourself, now is the time that you can please feel free to do that too.
Quiet group. There's got to be something they want to learn more about. Come on, don't make us pull it
I'm
out of
thinking
you.
so.
You guys answered everything.
You did a fantastic job. Andrew, we could jump into the additional questions we had if you want.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to. I think Karen might have touched base on that first one, but if there's anything else she wants to add, I think that was it's just so top of mind right now. So feel free to allow that one out.
Yeah. So the first question was, how do you use Gen AI to drive value for the organization? And as you mentioned, Karen touched on that, but if you want to elaborate a little more.
Yeah, I could talk about data and AI all day long, so I'll try to keep it brief. But right, you mentioned, right, you think of it like accelerators for enhancing effectiveness of your efficiency of your teams, and think of it like then enhancing the customer experience. So if you look at it like improving operational efficiency, then you're looking at automation of repetitive tasks, streamlining your processes, data analysis and insights. So freeing up employees from higher value to like be able to do higher value activities. I think that's one of the easy low-hanging fruits you can do. So if you have an executive coming to you going, hey, person X, you know, how can we use AI in our organization? Like that should be a no-brainer. And a lot of that will already be built into, you know, new tools you can go and explore using for your company, you know, helping your data modelers do better data modeling, or engineers do better data engineering, or you know, the business side being able to query the data in natural language as opposed to, you know, trying to dig through an analytics database. Those should be pretty easy low-hanging fruit. The next part is that sort of enhancing, if many of you have customers or clients, then that's enhancing their experience, like personalized marketing, chatbots, virtual assistants, content generation, those sorts of things. Certainly, I think that having innovative product development is a good way to go, kind of getting all your teams together and thinking about new product ideas. But Gen AI is great for things like, hey, I've got this idea. How can I kind of formulate it out? And working with Gen AI to help, you know, get that first skeleton in place and the ideas in place and generate a lot of different ideas for your teams to kind of go, oh, that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, and have that low entry barrier of new ideas to kind of use or shoot down because Gen AI came up with it, so who cares, right? And I think that's been a really good way to kind of use it as an accelerator in companies.
Cool. Are there any other questions that came in, Ashley?
So none that have been submitted, but we have a couple that I know you wanted to touch on too. If you want me to dive into that.
Sure. Maybe got another, what, 10 minutes or so? So
We do. So the second question is, how do you advocate for a data-driven culture within an organization, particularly to those who are non-technical? And what are the essential elements needed to foster such a culture? I know Cher touched on this a little bit at the beginning. I don't know if you want to go first.
I can take it. So non-technical folks they're not usually tricky. We have to speak to them in English. You know, we have to avoid jargon and tech talk and using acronyms. You know, I know a lot of technical people really speak in acronyms, and I don't even speak in acronyms. We're often the bridge between the business and IT. So when people interview me in acronyms, I'm like, yeah, I don't understand that one. And then when they use English, I'm like, oh yeah, well, here's the example of, you know, how I've applied that. So, you know, we have to really understand the value of data, and we have to explain it to those people what that value is. And, you know, sometimes our non-technical folks tend to be some of our stakeholders. They tend to be some of our leadership. They're not super data literate. So we have to explain things to them at a high level without getting into the weeds. You know, Karen mentioned earlier, you know, whether you're a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. My team is really vast because I have some executive advisors that are top-down people, and I'm a bottom-up person. So I'm always buried in the weeds, and I don't speak too much tech, but I tend to speak really quickly. So it seems like I'm saying things that maybe they can't keep up with. So we want to have that leadership buy-in and support from their top down, whatever that is. Putting together data literacy programs, you know, those lunch and learns. I find technical and non-technical documentation is a really great way for people to learn. Some people like visuals, and some people want to dig through the words. So I give people both in my documentation to make sure that I'm addressing all folks and how they learn and how they comprehend things. You know, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but centralized data repositories definitely help us get that one version of the truth. And when our non-technical people aren't showing up to meetings with different answers and having these collisions, that helps them to feel more comfortable in the environment, makes them, when two people do that, one of them feels stupid, or they both feel stupid and they're not sure which one should feel stupid. And it's not for either one of them. It's just what happened. So, and as Karen mentioned, you know, fostering that collaboration, having cross-functional teams really reduces not only data silos, but communication silos and skills silos and things like that. So, you know, involving those non-technical stakeholders in different parts of the business that maybe they aren't as familiar with, so they can start seeing and hearing how other people are working with data and getting a more well-rounded understanding of, you know, the value of data. And, you know, we've said it multiple times, it really is all about building trust. And that's between people, between teams, between processes, and with our data.
I love it. Well, I'm just looking at time. I know I always appreciate an extra 5 or 10 minutes in my day, so we can kind of wrap things up here. But Cher or Karen, is there anything else you want to just close with?
Other than a big thank you to everyone, like Cher had said, for coming to listen to this. No, this is great. I really love a chance to talk about data, and these are some really great thought-provoking questions. And it certainly got me to have to think more about things I haven't tried to put in words for a little while. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, Cher.
No, same here. I really appreciate everyone who joined live, everyone who's going to hopefully watch it later. I like to always sign off with, you know, be kind to each other. It's a rough world out there. You know, we don't have to go to war over some of these simple things. They're just communication problems. They're understanding problems. Nobody's out to, you know, typically nobody's out to get anybody. But, you know, just take deep breaths and try to exercise as much kindness and understanding and patience as you can. Our tech market is difficult. Our companies are, still struggling. It's an election year. We got a lot going on. So, we thought COVID was tough, but we've got some toughness coming up for us in the next 100 days. And, just keep each other in mind.
Love
Here.
the,
Talk to understand each other, not talk at each other.
Well, again, with the bridge kind of opening that Ashley kind of went into, again, feel free to connect with folks into the bridge outside of this discussion today. And Cher, Karen, awesome job. You guys did a wonderful overview. I learned a lot today. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your days and sharing. And then Cher, if you want to even just give a plug for your company, where can people find you if they have questions or insights?
We are heavily overexposed on LinkedIn. Always letting people know where I'm going to be next, because I do a lot of conference speaking. We have a website. I'm probably the easiest person to find on LinkedIn because I have 7 letters to my name. And if you remember the first part of it, which is pretty memorable since I was named after the singer, my mom used to work for her and Sonny in the late 60s. So by coming by a famous name, it's pretty easy to find me. So. And I love connecting with new people and sharing knowledge and answering questions. And I know a lot of people are trying to upskill and reskill and find their way in this, navigating through this technical market right now. And I really do my best to try to give everyone a bump ahead if I can.
You're fantastic at that. We all appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, you guys enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon, and thanks so much for attending. We'll put this together. It's going to be recorded and sent out. Anything else you want to add to that, Ashley?
No. Yeah, feel free to share the recording with anyone in your network who would find this content valuable. And please feel free to also invite them to join us in the bridge. And thank you, Karen and Cher, for joining us.
Thanks. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.